New Year's Eve in New York has a way of lowering your standards. For plans, for people, for reality itself. Everything feels temporary, like the city collectively agrees that whatever happens tonight doesn't fully count. That night, I was out with two close friends. We started at an apartment in the East Village, drinking cheap champagne from mismatched glasses, then made our way to a rooftop party in Brooklyn that one of them had scored invites to through work. It was one of those parties that tries very hard to feel exclusive. Space heaters blasting, a DJ who clearly thought this was his big break, everyone pretending the cold wasn't getting to them. Around 11:30, I noticed her. She was standing near the bar by herself, not scrolling on her phone, not scanning the room. Just watching, not in a creepy way, more like she was waiting for something specific to happen. I walked over and introduced myself. The conversation was effortless in a way that immediately stood out. No awkward beats, no polite laughter. She was quick, funny, sharp in that way that makes you feel like you're suddenly keeping up instead of leading. She pulled me onto the dance floor within minutes. Her name was Myra, at least that's what she said. When I asked her to repeat it, she laughed and said people always messed it up. She wrote it on the back of my hand with a pen, like that was somehow necessary. I remember thinking it was oddly intimate for someone I'd known less than 10 minutes. Midnight hit. We kissed. Fireworks went off somewhere far enough away to feel distant and unreal. By 12:30, she leaned in and asked if I wanted to get out of there. We took an Uber back to my place. Nothing about it felt rushed or strange. It felt easy, comfortable, like a night that made sense while it was happening. We stayed up talking for a while after. She told me she was originally from Southern California, that she was a painter, that she used to do street art before switching to more traditional work. Her dad was a patent lawyer. Her birthday was in late April. She had two cats with ridiculous names she laughed at while telling me. These are random details. I know that, they matter later. Eventually, she mentioned her clothes smelled like the bar, so I threw them in the wash. She borrowed one of my t-shirts and we fell asleep not long after. At the time, it felt like one of those nights you'd remember fondly and then slowly forget. I didn't know it was the last normal moment I'd have with her, because when I woke up, she was gone. I didn't panic when I woke up and realized she was gone. That's important. I want to be clear about that. There was no sudden jolt, no fear, no confusion yet. Just the quiet, mildly disappointing realization that she'd left early. That happens, especially after New Year's Eve. People disappear before the sun comes up all the time. I lay there for a minute, staring at the ceiling, replaying pieces of the night. Her laugh. The way she'd leaned in close to talk over the music. The fact that she'd taken her shoes off the second she walked into my apartment like she'd been there before. Then I got up to use the bathroom. That's when I noticed the lock. My front door has one of those old-fashioned deadbolts. It doesn't automatically lock. You can only turn it from the outside with a key. I remember this clearly because I've locked myself out more than once. The bolt was still turned. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at it, waiting for my brain to correct whatever misunderstanding I was having. It didn't. I tried the handle anyway. Locked, secure. At first, I told myself maybe she'd closed it behind her without thinking. But that explanation collapsed immediately. There's no way to lock it from the inside. I knew that. I'd lived there long enough, so I checked the rest of the apartment. Slowly at first, casually. Bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, living room, nothing. My place isn't big. There's nowhere to hide, no back door, no fire escape. The windows barely open wide enough to let air in, let alone a person out. Still, I checked the closet. I don't know why. Some part of me expected her to be there, standing perfectly still, waiting for me to open the door so she could laugh and tell me I was overthinking everything. The closet was empty. That's when the unease finally showed up. Not fear, not yet. Just that uncomfortable pressure you get when something refuses to fit into the shape it's supposed to. I went into the kitchen and checked the washer and dryer. Her clothes were gone. The t-shirt I'd lent her was gone too, which meant she had definitely slept here, definitely woken up, definitely moved through the apartment, and somehow she'd left without leaving. I started pacing, retracing my steps from the night before, trying to remember if I'd locked the door at any point, trying to catch myself in a mistake. Then it hit me. I had no way to find her, no phone number, no last name, no social media, not even a mutual friend. I knew her name, I knew where she said she was from, I knew her birthday. I knew her cats' names, and yet there was no proof she had ever existed in my apartment at all. That was the moment the night stopped feeling like a hookup story, and started feeling like something unfinished. Because the more I thought about it, the more one question refused to leave me alone. If she never unlocked the door, how did she leave? I didn't call anyone right away. For most of the afternoon, I just existed inside the apartment, moving from room to room like something might change if I kept looking. I replayed the night on a loop. Her voice, the way she said my name, the exact spot she'd left her shoes by the door. Nothing felt dreamlike. That was the problem. By early evening, the confusion had settled into something heavier. Not panic, not fear. Just a dull sense that I was missing a piece I should already have. I kept catching myself reaching for my phone, opening it, then locking it again without doing anything. At some point, without really deciding to, I called Ethan. We'd been close since college. Even after graduating and ending up on opposite sides of the world, we talked regularly. Calling him out of the blue wasn't unusual. What was unusual was how long it rang before he picked up. When he did, he sounded distracted. Not tired, not hungover, just off, like his thoughts were somewhere else and he'd been interrupted mid-sentence. We made small talk at first. Work, travel, how New Year's Eve had gone. The usual filler you use before getting to whatever you actually want to say. I mentioned the party, the girl I met. How she disappeared in the morning. He laughed, but it wasn't real, more reflex than amusement. Then he said something like, "Yeah, same thing happened to me." That got my attention. He told me he'd been out the night before, big party, met a woman almost immediately. They clicked in that rare, effortless way that feels like skipping steps. She came back to his place. They stayed up talking. She left in the morning without waking him. No number, no contact info, nothing. He said he felt stupid for how much it was bothering him. I told him he wasn't alone, that the exact same thing had happened to me. There was a pause, not a dramatic one, just long enough to notice. Then he said her name, Myra. My stomach dropped so suddenly it felt rehearsed, like my body had been waiting for that word. I asked him to describe her. He didn't hesitate. He just started listing things, where she was from, what she did for work, her birthday. The random, pointless details you only remember when someone felt real to you. Every single one matched. I cut him off and asked about her cats. He stopped talking. Then he said their names. That was when I stood up. I don't remember deciding to, I just did. Like my body needed to be vertical to process what was happening. He sent me photos. It was her. Same face. Same smile. Same crooked detail in her teeth I hadn't even realized I'd noticed. Here's the part that refuses to make sense. He met her almost 12 hours before I did, on the other side of the world. There is no flight, no route. No possible timeline where she could have been with him and then with me. The math doesn't bend, it breaks. And that was the moment I stopped asking how she left my apartment and started asking what she actually was. Ethan and I didn't scream when we realized the math didn't work. That surprises people when I tell them. They expect panic or excitement or at least disbelief loud enough to feel cinematic. What we felt instead was something closer to caution. Like we'd both wandered too close to an edge and instinctively stopped moving. For days after that call, we circled the same questions without ever touching them directly. We tried to explain it in ways that felt safe. Memory overlap. Coincidence stretched thin. Two different women who just happened to share a name, a birthday, a profession, and a strangely specific set of personal details. None of those explanations survived more than a few seconds of honest thought. The problem wasn't just that Myra appeared in two places. It was that she behaved exactly the same in both. The same pauses in conversation. The same little corrections when details about her came up. The same way she seemed fully present, like she had nowhere else she needed to be. Ghosts aren't supposed to do that. Neither are hallucinations. And whatever she was, she didn't feel unfinished. She didn't feel broken or confused or lost. She felt intentional. That's what started to bother me the most. I began replaying the night with a different lens. Not looking for gaps, but for patterns. How she'd been alone at the party. How she'd never once checked her phone. How she'd known exactly when to leave without either of us needing to say it out loud. How she never talked about the future. No plans, no next time. No casual assumptions that people usually make without thinking, just the present, completely, almost carefully. I started thinking about New Year's Eve itself, about how strange it is as a concept. A night where time becomes ceremonial, where the world agrees to pause, count down together, and then collectively pretend something has changed. That pause started to feel important. I wondered if some things exist only inside it. Not before, not after. Just in that thin, stretched moment where the old year hasn't let go and the new one hasn't fully arrived. What if Myra wasn't crossing time zones? What if she was crossing moments? Ethan admitted he'd thought the same thing but hadn't wanted to say it out loud. He told me he couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't been looking for people. She'd been looking for experiences, borrowing them, collecting them. Not to stay, just to exist briefly, completely. That thought lodged itself somewhere deep and uncomfortable. Because if that was true, then she didn't disappear from my apartment. She expired. And if that was the case, then she hadn't vanished because something went wrong. She vanished because the window closed. New Year's Eve came and went again the following year. I went out. I counted down. I smiled when I was supposed to. But part of me stayed alert, watching the room, watching the clock, waiting for that moment when time feels soft. Because once you notice that softness, you start to wonder what else might be using it, and whether you'd recognize it before it was gone again. New Year's Eve is coming again. That's why I'm telling this now. Not because I want answers, not because I think anyone can explain what happened. I'm telling it because time is about to do that thing again. The pause, the stretch, the moment where the world collectively holds its breath and pretends it knows what comes next. I've been paying attention to that moment ever since. Not just to clocks, to people. There's a look some people get on New Year's Eve, right before midnight. A kind of looseness behind the eyes, like they're halfway somewhere else already. I never noticed it before, but now I see it everywhere. In bars, at parties, on the subway. People who aren't waiting for the countdown. People who seem like they already know when they're leaving. I stopped going to big parties after that year. Too much noise, too many faces. It's harder to notice patterns when everything is loud. Now I keep it small. A few friends, a quiet place. Somewhere I can see the whole room at once. I don't look for her. That's the lie I tell myself. What I actually look for is familiarity that arrives too fast. Conversations that skip steps. People who feel like they're remembering you instead of meeting you. People who never talk about tomorrow, not even casually. I think about all the little things I ignored. How she never checked the time. How she didn't care when midnight happened, only that it did. How she left my apartment without urgency, without hesitation, like she knew exactly how long she had. I used to wonder if she'd felt afraid when she realized it was ending. Now I don't think so. I think she knew, and I think that's worse. Ethan doesn't like talking about it anymore. He says thinking too hard about it makes the world feel thinner, like it might tear if you lean on it wrong. I understand what he means. Once you notice that some things don't move forward with the rest of us, it's hard not to wonder why. Or how many, or how often. Here's the part I don't share with him. Every year, sometime between 11:30 and midnight, I feel it again. That softness. That sense that the rules are briefly negotiable. It doesn't last long, maybe a minute. Maybe less, but it's there. And every year I notice at least one person leave without saying goodbye, not just stepping out for air, not heading to another party, just gone, like they were never meant to stay past that moment. I tell myself it's coincidence. I tell myself I'm projecting. I tell myself I'm not watching the door, but I am. Because if Myra was real, then she wasn't an accident. She was a consequence of the moment. And if that moment comes every year, then whatever she was isn't gone. It's just waiting, borrowing time, just like the rest of us, only better at knowing when it's up.